Hi everyone, my name is Rhiannon and welcome to my channel Blue Dog Board Games. Today I'm going to be giving you my thoughts and opinions on a brand new game on Kickstarter at the moment called Rewild South America, and this is a game from Treeceratops. Now you may be familiar with that name because they have also released a game called Zoo Tycoon and more recently an expansion, Zoo Tycoon New Shores, which I have also covered on the channel before. But Rewild South America is sticking with the nature theme but going about it in a different way. This game is a game where you are going to be rewilding your area. It is focusing on all of the ecosystems present in South America and going to be exploring real life examples of animals that you will see in that natural environment. You're going to be attracting native plant species, native herbivores, carnivores, all back into the home environment. This is a 1 to 4 player game which takes about an hour to play, and I would describe it as a light to medium card-driven action selection game. It also has elements of set collection and tile placement, and your wildlife cards that you're going to be attracting to your player area during the game are going to earn you immediate and end game scoring points. So in this review today, I do actually want to sort of break it down into a few sections, and I will put the sections into the description below if you did want to jump around a little bit. I am going to start off with an overview of how the solo mode works. So this is going to be assuming some level of knowledge of how the game works. But I do think it is quite important for me to sort of go through how it works. So when I am explaining my thoughts on the solo mode, you sort of know where I'm coming from. I also then want to talk about exactly my thoughts on the actual solo gameplay. I want to talk about the components. I also want to briefly touch on the 2-player mode because I have played this one solo and 2-player now. And I also then want to just finish off the review by giving you thoughts about how I feel this would fit into a gamer's life. So I want to give you some thoughts on why I think this game may be for you, and give you some reasons. And I will also give you some reasons why I think this game may not be for a particular type of gamer. So just a heads up today, this video has been marked as sponsored, but that is just because I have received this game to create content. I have not been paid for my work today, so I am just going to give you my full and honest thoughts on the solo mode here. And also just to say that this is like a pre-production, finalized copy of the game, so when you have a look at the overlay today, there are things that are going to be subject to change. The artwork and the component quality is not going to be in its final form. So without further ado, let's get straight into the review. So the first thing that I did want to actually focus on was giving you an overview of the solo mode of Rewild South America. This is not going to be a typical beat your own score solo mode, so I know that a lot of people do not like that, and that is not what is happening here. The solo mode in this game is going to be a simulation of a second player. I am going to refer to it as an automa throughout this review, but it is not specifically like an automa as you might otherwise know it. There's a lot of complicated automas, and this is not it. It's just a simulation, but for want of a better term, I'm going to refer to it as that in this review today. Basically, you're going to be playing your game exactly as you would in the multiplayer game, and then you're going to be taking control of them, the automa. They're going to be simulating their actions, and they're going to be pretty much subject to all of the rules that a normal player would be, subject to a couple of changes. In the solo mode, you're going to have your player area set up completely as normal with your own player board. The automa is also going to have their own player board set to the basic side. The board is actually double-sided, and as a player you can choose whether you want to play on the normal or expert side. The automa always is going to use the normal side, however. They also have their own deck of action cards, just like you will, and you're going to be shuffling these and placing them on top of the harvest card that you have in the deck. These decks of cards are going to be identical to yours, so you're not going to be seeing anything different to what they are throughout the game. 2 of these shuffled cards, however, are going to be turned 180 degrees. So these action cards are actually split into 2. You've got a top action and a bottom action. So that means that essentially they're going to be taking the bottom action of the cards twice during their cycle of their deck of cards. So during the game, you can actually do your turn as normal, and then it will go to those. On the automa's turn, you're going to be revealing one of their action cards. You're going to be flipping it over and trying to do the top action on that card. The actions that you may see are placing tiles out on your player board. You may be trying to upgrade tiles. You may be trying to gain resources and discarding cards from the display, just like an actual player would throughout the game. If the automa is unable to do the particular action that they're trying to do, for example, they might just be not having enough resources available for them to put out the tile that they need. You're going to be instead moving to the bottom action and then just continuing to draw cards until you actually find an action that they can do on their turn. After they've taken their action, they're going to be trying to attract cards from the main display into their player area, just like you're going to be doing. And in this display area, you will have plant cards, you will have your wildlife cards, you will also have carnivores or your predator cards. Just like a human player, they're going to be restricted, so they can attract up to one plant, up to one predator, and however many wildlife cards that they want. But they are going to be subject to all the restrictions, so they can only attract cards that have enough space for in their ecosystems, have the appropriate type of ecosystem or biome that they want to live in. Also, if you're attracting a predator, they have to have the appropriate prey for them to eat. So to make these particular decisions, there is a bit of a hierarchy that you need to go through. So at the moment, I actually don't have any of the player aids. From what I understand, they are going to be implementing solo player aids into the final copy, which is just going to improve this process to no end. At the moment, I have to refer to the rule book. So in order to actually decide what wildlife cards they're going to be attracting into their sort of player area, they're going to be having a look at these tiers of their preference. So not only are they going to be trying to attract cards that they can fit into their particular biomes that they have, as long as they've got enough room and the appropriate type, that they're going to be considering the highest value scoring cards. So if there's multiple cards that have appropriate areas that they can live in, they're going to be physically accommodating those that they will score them more points overall. So for example, if you've got one that's going to say 4 points per high tree symbol that you have at the end of the game, but the other one says 3 points per high tree symbol, they're always going to prefer the 4 points over the 3. For plant cards, they're going to be actually looking at trying to spread themselves evenly across their biomes. So they're going to try, if they've already got one in their grassland area, they're going to be trying to attract one either in the shrubland or rainforest area. And carnivores are more about triggering immediate points, so they're going to be looking at how they're going to be scoring higher. So you're just going to be taking your turns back and forth until one of you triggers the end of the game. This game does not have a set number of rounds, and instead you're going to be triggering the end of the game once one of 3 things happens. So the wildlife deck may become depleted, a player may have completely filled their player board full of biome tiles, or the automa may have done so. Or the more likely scenario that I have found is that you will have either 8 or 9 face-up wildlife cards in front of you, or the automa may have 8 or 9 face-up wildlife cards in front of them. I say 8 or 9. You can increase the difficulty of the game by saying that you want 9 at the end of the game. You're going to be then scoring your end game scoring criteria on your wildlife cards as normal, and the automa is going to be also doing the same, so they're going to be looking at exactly the same criteria as you are, but at the very end you're going to be multiplying their value by 1.5, and if you really want a challenge, they recommend that you multiply it by 2, and you win the game by beating their score as normal. Therefore, overall, this solo mode really does a good job of trying to simulate a 2-player game as close as possible. So before we actually go into the main crux of the review and my opinions on the solo mode here, I actually just wanted to sort of quickly say how my absolute favorite thing about this game so far, and that is the theme and how well integrated it is into the overall gameplay and the mechanics of this game. So in this game, you're going to be placing your biome tiles, and I think I said earlier, you can have your shrubland areas, you can have your grasslands, these can be upgraded, and you have your rainforest areas. And when you're going to be placing them on your player board, they may be subject to discounts. For example, if you have a wetland tile placed, this is going to allow you a water discount to neighbouring tiles. I just think this is an absolutely seamless way to integrate this theme into a really simple but a really clever spatial puzzle game. Unlike similar games, I don't feel there's a huge amount of resource gathering in this game. You really just sort of end up carefully conserving and managing your resources instead of trying to gather them throughout the game. And that's because you're going to be looking at these discounts for maximum efficiency throughout. And I just think that that really beautifully ties in with the overall feeling here of just trying to be mindful and careful with these ecosystems. Does that sound really silly? Even though there's just such simple mechanisms here of just tile placement and card play. I think the Rewild South America does a really, really great job of just integrating the theme into the overall feeling of everything you're doing. I just think that this has been really executed here really effortlessly. I just wanted to get that out of the way, and now we're going to go into the thoughts and feelings on the solo mode and the gameplay specifically. So there are some really interesting decisions to be had in Rewild South America, especially as the game progresses and you start to build up a bit of an ecosystem on your player board, and there's just automatically a lot more decisions to be had once the game progresses in the first couple of rounds. On your turn, you're going to be weighing up everything from the cards that are going to be available to attract into your biomes, your endgame scoring criteria that you have on your wildlife cards that you've already taken, your resources that you have, the discounts that you may have when you're going to be building these biomes, what predator cards are available and whether or not they're going to be beneficial for you to take, or whether it's better to actually not consume the prey animal underneath the card. And that's even without considering what the automa is going to be doing. There's definitely going to be elements of randomness here when it comes to cards coming out, but you can sort of see to some extent what the automa is going to be perhaps playing or likely to be doing on their next turn, and therefore you are able to plan your turn around that a little bit if you wanted to do so. So overall, there is definitely a good few things to think about on your turn there, and there's quite a lot of depth here. So at first when I played the game, I did think that taking their turn was quite long-winded and convoluted, but actually as I've got used to it and after a couple of plays, I have sort of changed my mind on that, and I don't think it's a problem anymore. The downtime overall has definitely improved. I think it's a really, really tricky line to tread because on one hand, you've got your beat your own score solo modes, which offer the least amount of like solo experience to some players. Some people love it, but others don't because you're just playing by yourself with no interaction whatsoever. Whereas you've obviously got some more involved solo modes, which offer a greater multiplayer simulation experience, but have a lot more overhead. So I definitely think this is something that is really tricky to balance and is going to be really difficult to sort of keep everyone happy. But I think that this is actually quite a happy medium. I think that this game does quite a good job of being an involved solo mode, but not too involved to feel that there is a ridiculous amount of overhead. I do think that this is a lighter experience overall. It's described as like a medium weight game, but I personally, if you know my gaming preferences, I would sort of call this a lighter to medium weight game. And so I did question at first whether I thought the automa was a bit too involved for that weight of game. But again, I think I have overridden that and actually have come to appreciate the complexity at which this automa can offer a multiplayer simulation experience. So the main thing that I found for me was actually the managing their preferences when it comes to attracting animal cards into their ecosystems, and I have to say that that is something that's going to be much improved in the final copy because there are going to be solo player aids included in those copies which will show you the hierarchy in which they are working through their decision process, and I don't have that, and so that's definitely something that is going to improve. The action cards in the solo mode also actually perform very slightly differently sometimes as compared to our particular actions. For example, on our turn we can choose to expand our shrubland tiles by adding extension tiles next to each shrubland area that we have. The automa can also actually do this action, but will just not choose to do so unless they have at least 2 shrubland tiles on their player board. So there's just essentially a couple of small rule changes that I have found a little bit tricky to remember, but that all of that information that's going to be different for the automa and a little bit trickier to manage is all going to be on solo player aid cards, and so I think that that's just going to make the game so much more smooth to play. Ultimately, these decisions that you're making just help this solo mode really solidify the feeling of playing against a real human player. It's actually got thought behind it. It feels like you are playing a brainy person, you know. It feels like you're playing against something with meaning, and so that's just going to offer you a much greater experience if you are looking for something that has that feeling to it, and that does come with overhead, but I think it is managed really well, and you can get your turns down for them. It does depend on what they're trying to do. Some turns can be long, so can yours, but most of the time they can be done in pretty much half the time, if not quarter of the time, that your personal turns will be done. And so I think it's actually really well implemented. Talking about that a little bit more, I do think that this solo mode has a really good aspect of feeling like a genuine multiplayer experience. It keeps up a really good pace, it really gets in the way, and it takes the cards that you are after, but not so much in a way that it feels really frustrating and restricting. There's still plenty of good things that you can do on your turn normally, so I think that's a really good and easy balance to get wrong, but this one I think does it really well and definitely does it right. I have roughly about the same number of wins and losses in this game, so again, the difficulty I think is just about right as well, but there are multiple ways that you can play this game. Quite frankly, I have found that the normal cards that come with the game are a little bit too simple for my liking. I have actually played the game and enjoyed it a lot more once I've integrated the expert cards into the game. So you just swap out a couple of the wildlife cards and integrate the expert versions in, and you've got some extra cards to put into the plant deck as well. And again, you swap out some of the carnivore, the predator cards for expert mode cards. The expert cards that are included in the game offer a few more ways to score and gain other effects. For example, my favourite addition to the game are the wildlife cards, the expert wildlife cards, and these allow you to score immediate points when you have a certain pattern of biome tiles on your board. When you achieve this, you can then just take that animal meeple of the same type as the wildlife card that you have, and you're going to be placing that on the pattern arrangement, which is just amazing. It looks so good on the table. And the Automa is actually going to be using some of the aspects of these expert mode cards, much like you're going to be, but it just doesn't with all of it. So, for example, you can score the points just like you when you're going to be creating those patterns and placing those meeples, but it isn't going to be using some abilities of the expert plant cards. I really, really love the addition of all of these different modes that you can sort of integrate into the game. There's a few different ways you can do it. So they sort of suggest you can play on the normal side of the board, or you can flip the board and go for the expert difficulty, which is going to allow you to score slightly differently for sets of cards that you have. You can also push the end game trigger up to 9 visible wildlife cards instead of the 8. You can integrate the expert plant cards, you can integrate the expert wildlife cards. You can do mix and match all of these aspects to create the game exactly as you want and to alter the difficulty to your personal tastes. And this integrates into the solo mode just basically seamlessly. You do have to be aware of which aspects they are going to be utilizing and what they're going to ignore, but actually that was really, really easy to remember. It was very simple. And on top of that as well, you could add an additional difficulty modifier there by just adjusting the multiplier at the end of the game. If you want an easier game, you can just match. Just don't use a multiplier for the Automa's score. If you want a real challenge, go up to timesing their score by 2. I think 1.5 is about right for me. It does differ from game to game just because of the luck of the draw of what cards come out, but overall all of the integration of all of those different elements just allows for a really flexible gameplay to tailor exactly how you want it. At first, I was a little bit unsure whether I felt that the game had too much focus on endgame scoring and not enough short-term goals and enough to push you through the game and to make you feel constantly rewarded. I definitely think there is an element of that here. It can be quite tricky to see at a glance sort of where the current status of the game is when you just look at the scores, just because of that endgame multiplier. And I mentioned earlier that Rewild South America does not have a set number of rounds. You are going to be able to trigger the end of the game. Or your Automa is going to be triggering the end of the game by doing certain things or depleting certain things in your game. And initially, I just generally tend to prefer games that have a set number of rounds, so you know where you stand, you know how to manage everything, and you just know in terms of playtime as well exactly how long the game is likely to last for going forward. But in hindsight, I actually feel that this way round fits this game a lot better. Because this game actually does a really good job of simulating that human player, I found it's quite nice to have that fluid endgame, because it allows you as a player to either try and speed the game along or slow it down depending on how well you feel you're doing. I found myself on certain playthroughs just carefully examining the Automa's player area and then just comparing it to mine to inform my decision-making process, and really trying to force like a quick endgame trigger or really deliberately trying to slow them down because I haven't quite got enough of what I want to do, my overall plan. I found this to be quite a fun additional aspect to think about throughout the game, and it certainly surprised me, I think, of how much I enjoyed that aspect, where originally I thought I was a bit turned off by that. It just adds another layer of decision making that isn't sometimes there in solo modes. The one thing that I liked about Rewild South America and its decision process here is that when it's going to be evaluating the predator cards that it wants to take, it's going to be first looking at what wildlife cards it has in its player area. It's only going to be taking predator cards when it has a wildlife card that has an immediate effect on it. So this just essentially means that it's never going to be covering up scoring criteria. So let me actually backtrack a second. When you have a wildlife card in your player area, you're going to be able to place predator cards on top of it to simulate a food chain. The predator is going to be covering up that card, and so actually you're not going to be looking at the card underneath anymore when it comes to considering points and set collection and endgame scoring criteria. So if you have an endgame scoring criteria on your wildlife prey card and you take a predator card and put it on top, you are not any longer scoring the endgame scoring criteria on that wildlife card. And so this just essentially means the automa is always going to be simulating what a human player should be doing and actually thinking about the process a little bit more. I think this was implemented really smoothly because essentially it just means that it only takes predator cards when it's really going to be at the absolute maximum benefit for it. And this just stops it from gaining too many, scoring too much, churning out through these cards too quickly, because these are going to be cards that feel like that you only want to take them in specific circumstances. As a human player, that's what you are feeling like you want to do. And playing against the automa, you can certainly feel that they are only going to be taking those in those situations when it is 100% certain that they want that card. And that just really feels really smooth here. They've done a really great job of trying to implement that decision process into this automa mode. The only other thing I wanted to sort of say about the overall gameplay here, and this isn't specifically about the solo mode, it's more about the action cards that you are playing. When you're going to be playing your action cards, they actually have symbols at the top and the bottom, according to if you're taking the top or bottom action, and you're going to be playing all of your action cards in a column, keeping the symbols visible. These icons are going to come into effect during the round if you are going to be triggering immediate scoring cards with those symbols, or I believe at the end of the game, you may have some triggers that use the visible symbols that you have on your action cards that you've played during the round to score potential additional points. However, the icons in reality just actually have a really small impact to the overall gameplay and don't really trigger much in the way of additional points. So I do wonder if they need to have an additional function somehow, or perhaps not be there at all. Throughout my plays so far, I haven't really found a great need to concentrate on them to any degree. They're just very much an afterthought. So, I think there is an element of set collecting here in this game with all of the endgame triggers that you are going to be focusing on. But I do think it could be made even stronger by just making these icons of your action cards matter a little bit more. So I do think that the set collecting aspect of this game is quite strong overall, but it could be made even stronger by focusing on these icons and manipulating them somehow to matter that much more in the game. So therefore, just to sum up my thoughts and feelings on the solo mode of Rewild South America, I do think that the solo mode does take a little bit of time to get used to, but I think a lot of those feelings were actually brought on by not having the solo player aids from the off, and with those implementations in the final version of the game, I think this is going to be a really, really solid automa here. This is going to simulate a really good multiplayer experience for you if that is the sort of solo mode that you like. The automa is able to make really meaningful decisions and really cause a bit of havoc sometimes, taking the cards that you want and not getting in the way too much and not affecting your enjoyment of the game, but still just offering that competitive gameplay. It's not going to be able to completely and utterly mirror exactly what a human player is going to be doing here, but because you have that multiplier at the end of the game, that's just going to offer you a really easy way to just manipulate this game experience to exactly your particular liking and offset that difficulty in trying to ensure that they can work through the decision process as a normal human player would. And there's always going to be something good that you feel that you can do on your turn, no matter what the automa is doing. even though this is a pre-production copy of the game and everything's subject to change, I do still want to go through my thoughts and feelings on the components and artwork here. The first thing most people are probably going to notice is the absolutely gorgeous Ghibli-style artwork that you have here. This is honestly like one of my most favorite art styles. It's absolutely gorgeous and the cards just look absolutely great. It is funny though, when I first see this style of art, I'm so familiar with it being in a whimsical or fantasy type setting that when I first received the game, I was half expecting to see like wings or dragons on the cards. But this game features all real world animals, so it was a bit jarring, I'll say at first, but this is just me being unfamiliar with this style of art in any other situation. And I just absolutely love the fact that this style of art is going to be, or has now been seen in other mediums and genres and is just not seen in fantasy film situations. It definitely deserves to have a wider reach. I have to say as well that the graphic design of Rewild South America has been really well done. All of the icons are really easy to read and are very clear, and that's such an important aspect of gameplay, especially when things are triggering with all of these endgame bonuses. That's so important and it's been really well implemented. So I've only ever received a couple of pre-production copies to do reviews of before, and I have to say that I've actually been astounded by the quality of the components at this stage. You know, there's multiple games that I could mention that are in their final form and the component quality is poor and everyone knows it, but we still pay that price point, and I always just get uncomfortable paying that price point for the game, which I know is just bad in quality. Here in Rewild South America though, you can expect really high quality stuff. The cardboard that I had just punched out of the boards super easily. It all looks really, really great. It all pops. And I just want to sort of mention the high tree components as well. So in this game, when you are going to be, or when you want to consider upgrading your rainforest tiles, you have the ability to place high trees on these tiles. This essentially means that you have an extra area of the rainforest that you can use to attract wildlife. You can have a species that can live on the floor of the rainforest, and as long as it's an animal that's able to do so, you can have a creature that is able to live on top of these high trees, essentially meaning you can have two animals on the one biome tile. The cardboard trees are actually put together by slotting two cardboard pieces together at right angles, and then you have a wooden meeple that you can place on top. Originally when I saw this, I was worried. I was imagining the Everdell tree, which frayed for me, and I was imagining all the meeples falling off just as you knock them slightly, and it was going to be chaos, I thought. But I have to say, they are also actually incredibly sturdy and they fit the meeples spot on perfectly. I have not had one single meeple or tree that didn't go together, and it doesn't wobble. It fits in amazingly. So I'm automatically really impressed. This is pre-production copy and everything is looking spot on. It is completely without flaw. On top of that as well, the high trees and the meeples just automatically give this game a bit of a great toy factor. It feels really tactile and it has a really nice table presence. So finally going into the animal meeple side of things, so you actually have two different types in the box. You have your animals that can live on the high trees, and you also have animals that are used in the expert mode of the game. So these are going to be the ones that when you create a sort of orientation of your biome tiles, you can place one of these meeples in the center of that orientation and score those points. The high tree meeples, they're going to be used in both the normal mode and the expert mode, and anytime that you attract an animal into your player area that is able to live on a high tree, you take that particular meeple. You can either place that on the tree directly if you have space for it, or you can place them on the forest floor. If you later upgrade that rainforest tile to a high tree, you can just move the meeple onto the tree. All of the meeples are just looking really great. They are screen printed on both sides, and the artwork that they use on the cards is representative of that on the meeple, so they're really easily identifiable. So overall, already in this pre-production copy, the components are looking stunning, artwork is amazing, iconography is amazing, and the wooden components are just great. The only thing that I will say is the size of the main board. I think could be made a little bit bigger. I'm trying to imagine it fitting in the box. I'm not sure if that would mean you have to make the box bigger, but I personally feel once you've got all of the cards out on that board, there is little to no wriggle room either side. So the cards are very much next to each other, and so they're sort of being knocked left, right and centre when you're getting them out. It also means that you don't see a lot of artwork on this main board. There isn't a lot of artwork anyway, but I feel like if you made it a bit bigger, it would just look better and it will play better because you're not knocking cards all over the place. So I now just wanted to actually talk about the 2-player game, because there's a couple of things that I wanted to talk about that I actually found when I was playing 2-player. But these are very relevant to the solo mode as well, because ultimately the solo mode is going to be simulating this 2-player experience for you. So one of the main things that I wanted to say is that in a low player count game, either 2-player or solo, the main board state and the wildlife cards that are present sometimes don't change very much, or perhaps even at all from one turn to the next. So if your opponent, for example, doesn't want to take any cards that turn or cannot take cards, you do have some actions available to you. So this will allow you to gain some resources and discard cards from the player board. And when you're playing against the Automa, they actually discard 2 cards of that type. You have to discard from the rightmost card, so you can't choose. But I actually find that these actions are played quite irregularly, because as I said earlier in the review, although this is a resource management game, I actually feel like this is very heavily management of those resources rather than gaining and spending of those resources. I have found that I only want to use those actions where I gain resources and discard cards very few times in the game, maybe once, maybe twice, and that's about it. So if your opponent is not actually taking cards, your player board that you're going to be, not your player board, the main board that you're going to see is not going to change much. This just essentially means that you're not going to be necessarily always seeing the cards you want for a bit, and that can sometimes feel a little bit frustrating. In some games, but not all games that I've played, it can feel like there's just not enough card turnover. But I will say that this is something that is super, super easy to change exactly to your liking. You could implement all sorts of house rules about discarding 2 instead of 1 card. You can maybe spend resources to allow you to refresh things. This is the sort of thing that can be really tailored to your own taste at the end of the day. Another thing to mention too is that some turns can run reasonably long, and that can be either your own personal turn or an opponent's turn, and sometimes, occasionally, on Automa's turn as well, because you're going to be taking multiple things. You may be taking a plant card, you may be taking multiple wildlife cards, you may be then taking a predation card as well. So that just means there may be some downtime between your turns if you are playing multiplayer. I have to say as well that the board state in a larger player count game, I would imagine, would change quite significantly from one turn to the next. So you're going to be taking your cards, and then there's going to be 3 other people taking their turns and cards from the board before you get to go again. So ultimately, there's minimal planning that you can do sometimes, I would imagine, before your next turn, which will just increase the amount of time that you're going to take on your personal turn. I do wonder whether it would actually be better to have a double-sided player board, one side with a solo and 2-player game set up with less cards available, and the other side a few more cards available for 3 to 4 players. I do wonder if that would actually work quite well. But again, this is just my initial thoughts, because I have not played this game at 3 or 4 players, so I'm not sure. I've just found that there have been a couple of turns when playing 2-player that definitely feel a little bit slower than others. So now I just want to summarize my thoughts here and give you a couple of quick pointers to sort of guide you in the right direction of this game may be for you if, and this game may not be for you if. So Rewild South America may be a game for you if you want a solo mode that happens to simulate a 2-player game really, really well without bogging down the overall gameplay. You definitely do have to think about running this Automa, and there's a few things that you do need to sort of really consider throughout their turn, but I don't feel that its overhead outweighs its benefit that it's going to give you. This game may also be for you if you like a solo mode where you can very clearly alter the difficulty of the game exactly to your liking. In Rewild, you do have multiple ways in which you can do this. You can flip your own player board and play on the expert side. You also have lots of different cards that you can also incorporate, like your upgraded or your expert wildlife cards, your expert plant cards, your expert predation cards. So there's lots and lots of flexibility of how you want to play the game and the difficulty, not to mention adjusting the multiplier at the end of the game. You may also really like this game if you like games that have specific endgame triggers instead of number of rounds. This allows you to have a really unique game experience, really, where you can really alter the flow of the game and try and trigger it either faster or slower according to how you feel you are playing at that time or how your opponent is playing. This can just offer another layer of complexity and another thing to think about during your gameplay. Rewild may also be for you if you like a lighter or medium weight game that still has really meaningful decisions behind it and really gives you the feeling of feeling that you are trying to squeeze as many points as possible in the last couple of rounds of the game. And finally, Rewild South America may be for you if you like nature games that have a really beautiful theme, and this theme is absolutely seamlessly incorporated into the overall gameplay and mechanics. This game also offers a great amount of table presence, looks amazing on the table, and has a really nice tactile nature to it. Rewild South America may not be for you, however, if you are somebody that can get a bit overwhelmed with Automa style gameplay. As I mentioned earlier, this is not specifically an Automa style. This just aims to simulate a multiplayer experience. But despite that, there is going to be a certain amount of overhead. You are going to have to take yourself out of your own gameplay to some extent in order to make sure that you are doing their turn correctly. This game may also not be for you if you are after a really heavy resource management game. There is definitely some resource management here, but instead of gaining and spending loads of resources on your turn, I do really feel like this is much more of a gain and spend in minimal quantities at very specific time points in your game, and instead really utilizing the discounts that you can get from various tiles on your biome player board. Rewild may also not be for you if you are after some really heavy and intricate decision making. Points really are quite easy to gain in this game, whether they're immediate ones or just gain some cards which will give you an endgame scoring criteria. So this does come away feeling like a really good, positive overall experience. It's always going to be something good for you to do, but this is not going to feel like a really heavy, intricate engine building type of game in any particular way. There is definitely some scope to do this with your endgame scoring criteria, but I do feel like that is much more limited than other heavier games that you may be otherwise familiar with. Okay, we're going to wrap that review up here today for Rewild South America. I hope this has given you a better idea of how the solo mode works, and also whether or not this will be a game that you would like to add to your collection. Do absolutely make sure that you check out the campaign, and I will make sure I link that one in the description down below for you to have a look at if you are interested. And I do want to just have a big shout out to Treeceratops and a massive thank you for allowing me the opportunity to play and review your amazing game. So thank you so much for watching today, and I will see you on the next video. Bye bye!